I lived with PTSD for years before I knew I had it. It's not something I easily accepted because of the stigma and because of the assumptions of what it means to have something like trauma or PTSD and what they really are and what causes it. In this video, I'm going to break down some lessons from Peter Levine that helped me not only realize what I was carrying, but also how to finally start letting go. So I have the book from Peter Levine, Healing Trauma. I read it on my Kindle. It is a great book. I read it years ago and I took some notes. And years later, I was reflecting on it and I pulled back a few lessons that I want to share with you in the video today. So lesson number one is trauma is just energy stored in the body. When it comes down to it, that's what it is. So I have a quote from the book here. When we can discharge our residual survival energy, we feel less threatened and overwhelmed by life. While we are frozen, any moment is frightening or chaotic. So what Peter Levine is saying here is that the residual survival energy is what gets stored in the body when we experience something that causes trauma or causes us to have PTSD for the long term. And I can think of a handful of reasons in my life that have caused this. Now, they're not just events. And I get into this a little bit later on as well in the next lesson. But basically, an event can cause something to be traumatic for you or for you to have something like PTSD. But also something that is over time can also cause that. And so in that event or in that long duration of whatever that is, you as a person, you as a body, as a human, can start to store this residual survival energy. This is what Peter Levine is talking about. And as we start to discharge that, that is when we start to feel, as he says, less threatened and less overwhelmed by life, because it is the amount of energy and just the fact that that is all stored inside of the body that causes us to have these mental shifts and these dissonances and this overwhelm and stuff like that. So the first lesson, one of the most important lessons that I've learned is that at the physical level, all trauma is energy stored in the body. So that's lesson number one. Lesson number two is you don't have to bring up an event to release the energy associated with it. And the quote that I have from Peter Levine for lesson number two is, you don't have to consciously remember an event to heal from it. That's straight from the book. So in my experience, here's what I've realized. As you work with the energy that's in the body, as you work with this trauma, this traumatic energy, you might get memories that come up. You might get some kind of memory attached to it. It depends on the modality you use, on the approach you take, how you kind of start your session or start your work. You might get something that comes up. You might not. As I was saying before, not all trauma is an event. For an example, in my case, it was more of neglect in the earlier years of my life than a specific event. So that's something that might not have a memory associated with it, right? Maybe you're working on something that you cannot remember. Something before the ages of 5 or maybe in your infancy, or it was a series of the neglect, for example, which is not just a single event. It's going to be something that happened over time. It was something that didn't happen. And those can be sometimes harder to really work with. So you don't have to remember an event or re-experience an event in order to do this type of work. And so the other thing that has come up in my own journey and also in helping and guiding others and teaching others through their own processing is a lot of times when you're doing this kind of work and you have this discharge, as Peter Levine calls it, when that energy comes up, it's going to, or it can definitely come out with the flavor of what it was, but not necessarily the attachment or the memory of what happened. So it could be energy that comes out with the flavor of anger or with the flavor of sadness or aggression or rage or something like that, but there might not be an actual memory attached to it, and that's totally fine. This is actually how it happens. You don't have to remember You don't have to attach those two things together. The energy itself has been separated from the memory or separated from the event, and that's okay. Lesson number 3 is that releasing energy can look big and loud, or it can be quiet and subtle. So the quote I have from the book here is, "The discharge can be dramatic and visible, or subtle and quiet. It can be an intense shivering or the slightest sense of inner trembling." So a couple stories here. One, as I started to do my own work and be on my own journey, I started sharing with some friends of mine that I was connected to kind of explain what was happening to me, because they might have been going through something similar. And they had these interesting events and experiences that were somewhat triggering for them, for sure. They were with their family. It was kind of a heated discussion. And all of a sudden, their body just started to shake. Their body just took over, and they started to shake and tremble. And their families were kind of freaking out, not really knowing what was going on. This is what I call a shakeout. This is an experience. This was the body shaking out a lot of that energy because something knocked over that domino. So this is an example of a dramatic, potentially loud shakeout, an experience, a discharge, as Peter Levine calls it, where this energy is being released from the body. In my somatic journey, I had many sessions with a therapist who really helped me. It was really a lot of shouting and yelling to get the energy out. And that was a loud event, right? That was a loud experience, a loud way of processing. It's not always that way, because to be honest, when I started at the very beginning of when I started feeling these things shift within my own body, a lot of it was very subtle. A lot of it was very quiet. A lot of it was with an inner process that I call mind works. And it's such an internal thing that only you're going to feel it, only you're going to notice it, but you're going to feel and notice the little shifts, the tingles in your body, your breathing change, how relaxed you feel afterwards. You're going to start feeling your skin again, which is something I go into in another lesson also. So it's not always loud and dramatic. It can be quiet and subtle, and that's okay. Lesson number 4 is that inner peace is possible. It is possible to get to the end or to get to the other side of whatever this is. To be honest, it's a lifelong journey. The quote I have from Peter Levine here is, "Afterwards, you might notice that things fall into place a little easier, or that you're calmer and more relaxed. Perhaps things that once upset you won't seem to bother you as much, and you are significantly less critical of yourself." I think this quote is fascinating and really interesting. So immediately after a discharge or a release or a session, it depends on the magnitude of that energy that was released, but you can have a significant difference in feeling afterwards. Calmer, more relaxed, feeling less critical of yourself, much, much lighter. In the first several sessions that I did, that was the case. That was true. But most of the time, we don't have these big events, these loud discharges, these high magnitude of energy being released. And so a lot of times it can be a more subtle feeling of relaxation, a more subtle feeling of buoyancy, of lightness. And by doing these sessions over the course of several weeks, several months, and really over the course of years, you're going to really notice the difference and notice the benefits. So it's not always a huge thing. It can be something small. And the other thing to notice or to remember is that we live in such conditioned states and we live in such routine days and lives that one release isn't going to completely break your pattern forever, right? One release is going to show you that something more is possible. And then you go back to your normal life and you're going to go back to your routine. You're going to go hang out with the same people, most likely. You're going to go have the same conversations and likely think similar thoughts. And so you're going to be back in the routine that you're in. So doing this as often as you can, and if you can learn the tools yourself to do this yourself, even better, because that is how you're going to maintain this level of what I call like an energetic cleanliness, right? Back to lesson 1, it's energy stored in the body. If we can have a routine of this energetic cleanliness, then that is how we are going to have this prolonged and more constant and more permanent feeling of buoyancy, of lightness, of being less critical on ourselves, as Peter Levine talks about. And then when you start taking this to more advanced levels, you can even start to do things like manifest things into your life that you hadn't had before or that you had lost touch with. It's pretty amazing, and I really hope everyone gets to the point where they can do things like this. All right, lesson number 5 is that this is where your resilience and your power actually comes from. It comes from doing this type of work. So the quote I have from Peter Levine here is that, quote, "As a result of consistent work with these exercises, people are able to develop greater resiliency and are more prepared to work through trauma symptoms should they resurface." So as you do this work more and more, you become more resilient and you are able to deal with things later on. You get triggered less. And I'm going to add in there that this is where your power comes from. So the definition of resilience is the capacity to withstand or to recover quickly from difficulties. And if you think about the ups and downs of your daily life, of your weekly life, right? We have these kind of big ups sometimes and these big downs, big ups and big downs. And as you do this work to maintain your, what I call your energetic cleanliness, as you discharge the pent up survival energy, as Peter Levine calls it, you smooth out this curve. So you don't have the big downs anymore. The events might be the same, but the way that your mind and body process that event, it doesn't make you fall into this little dip or valley. You know how to smooth it out and keep going. It's super powerful. So power, switching now to the idea of power, that this is where your power comes from. Power comes, and I've got another quote on this, but it comes from this suppressed rage and anger or aggression that we've repressed. So Peter Levine says in the book, here's a quote, "It is the force that mobilizes us to action and propels us forward to our desires and goals in life." He's talking about the aggression there that has been suppressed and trapped. Because a lot of times when we have this traumatic event or this long, little t versus capital T, little t events over time, that aggression that we would have felt in the moment is suppressed and just contained within the body. And so as we tap into that and we start to discharge it, we start to receive the capacity that we had once before, instead of keeping all of our power and energy, contained in this tiny little box. We are way more powerful than we think we are. All right, lesson number 6. This can help with setting boundaries in your own life. The quote I have from Peter Levine here is, "You are often unable to feel your own physical boundaries. This work can have an impact on other areas of your life, such as setting boundaries in relationships." I think this is a really interesting one because it's basically saying that the body and the mind are connected. What Peter Levine says is, because you can't feel the boundary of your own physical body, you have challenges setting boundaries in societal and social and relational environments, in your relationship with your family, with your spouse, with your girlfriend or boyfriend, with your partner, because we've numbed the boundary of our own skin and our own physical body, it's hard for us to set those boundaries in real life. I think this is a critical piece of all of this work and a really important insight into what's going on here, which is if you can't feel the physical body, the boundary of your physical body, then we are going to suffer in life because our boundaries are going to suffer and we can't have any. And in my own journey, I can tell you just straight up, I had no clue what boundaries are. I had no clue what they were. The word boundary was never in my vocabulary. And once I started using it, my family is like, "What are you talking about? What is why can't I do this? Why can't we do this? What's a boundary?" So it's something that just never existed in my family environment. And so it's not a skill I ever learned or something that I ever realized was needed in order to live a happy and fulfilled life as my own individual person. So as I started this work, one of the first things I realized was I can feel my skin more. I can sense the softness of my skin and of this layer. And even now, as I'm speaking about it, I'm getting tingles and I can feel the softness more and the sensitivity coming back to my hands, my fingers, to my skin in general. The more I did these exercises, the smoother and softer it would feel. So lesson number 7 is that the felt sense, what Peter Levine calls the felt sense, is at the core of all of this work. And my quote here from Peter Levine says, "To harness the instincts necessary to heal trauma, we must be able to identify and employ the indicators of trauma that are made available to us through the felt sense." So what is the felt sense? Honestly, it's kind of hard to put into words, but it's the mind-body connection. It's sensing what's going on in and around your body and also in the environment. This is a skill that takes time to develop, and this is the sense that we have lost as we carry the trauma or the PTSD longer and longer. We become more detached from our bodies because we are unable to sense it. We are unable to feel it the way that we once were able to. And as we build the felt sense, what I call the mind-body connection, then we are able to do this work more efficiently and have a greater impact on our own life and future because we've strengthened that muscle. And lesson number 8, the last thing I'm going to leave you with here today on this video, is keep going. The quote I have here from Peter Levine is, "This may feel like a different language to you at first, but with practice, it will become easier." This is a muscle that you can work. This is a muscle you can strengthen. It's going to feel uncomfortable at first, and that's because it is an uncomfortable thing if we're being totally honest. So the more that you allow yourself to push past your comfort zone and lean into what might be some discomfort of releasing the trauma that you've been carrying, you are going to build that muscle and it is going to become way easier, guys. This is something I've experienced directly from my own journey over the years. You have to just keep going. If there's anything, this is my tagline, guys. Just keep going. Level up and keep going. Level up some more and keep going. It's a never-ending journey, but it is one that is 110% worth doing because it is going to get you to be in a better place than you are today, and you are going to have the tools that you need for the rest of your life so that you can chip away at this survival energy that's been suppressed, like Peter Levine talks about. And the more you do that, the more you are going to experience the benefits that he shares in his books and in his teachings, because you are going to feel more empowered, more light, more buoyant, being less critical of yourself, which was a big thing that I also struggled with. So start and keep going, guys. That is some of the most important, if nothing else, that you take away from this video. Just start the journey, start the work, and keep going. That's it. All right, guys, I hope you enjoyed this video. Drop a comment below if you have started your journey. I'd be very curious to just hear your story, see where you're at. Don't share anything that you don't feel comfortable letting the internet know about. But, I want to connect with you here. So please drop a comment below, hit the like button if you'd like, and just let me know where you're at and what got you started or what books you're reading also. If there's a certain topic or book you want me to talk about, let me know as well. And I will see you guys in the next video. Take care.